Okay, we're live. We didn't get a countdown, which is okay. We don't need a countdown. Everybody knows what's going on today. This is Cowboy, and the gorilla couldn't make it today, so I'm going to take over for the hosting. We have Veles here. Obviously, as we always say, needs no introduction. Everybody was really looking forward to this show today. So I'm just going to go ahead and turn it right over to you, Veles. How are you doing, sir?
I'm just fine, my friend. How are you doing?
Doing pretty good. Are you? I see you have. I see you're living in the future. Veles 614. Are you? Are
Yes.
we? Are you? Did you discover time travel, sir? And you're not sharing the spoils.
I cannot put down the 13th. I just can't. I can't bring myself to do it. I'm just not going there.
I understand. Yeah. Well, what do you got? I know you got a ton of stuff planned, and then after you planned it, like all this other stuff happened. So I get the feeling we're going to be in for a big one today.
We are. And just an FYI, I'm quoting from Ghostbusters, the first movie. It's looking at me, Ray. Rumble seems to be sitting there.
Yeah, Rumble's not working.
Okay. Well, we'll deal with that offline. So if you're on YouTube, you're fine. If you're on Rumble, you're not going anywhere. Hang on just a tick while I put a message into Rumble.
I set it up because I use Rumble with Algo Factory. I set it up and I do it every day. But V did say Rumble's buggy, and so I don't know. You know, we got the jumper cables out. The vehicle is running, but right. I'm not sure the transmission is not going to slip today.
Right. It's in drive and it's just sitting there. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll make do with what we've got, and we'll have our what do you call it? Our maniacal genius on the IT side go fix that thing later and repost it to Rumble.
Yeah, like Grandma said, just idle home as long as you don't have uphill.
Yeah, absolutely. So to all of you out there in electronic land, thank you for joining us today. I've got a new avatar I'm trying out. We do have a lot today, and we got a lot of serious stuff to cover today. So let's strap in and get into it. And Algo, as always, I'll catch you on the back end unless I say something in the middle of this thing that you're like, whoa, wait a minute. So to start with the Bilderbergers. Just a reminder, those meetings are taking place currently, which began on Thursday the 12th and will run through Sunday the 15th. And of course, as always, I wonder what lovely things they have cooked up for us. The official topics, which are straight off their website, include the transatlantic relationship, Ukraine, the U.S. economy, Europe, the Middle East, authoritarian axis, which could be anybody, defense innovation and resilience, artificial intelligence, deterrence, and national security as it relates to AI. Proliferation, although they didn't identify the proliferation of what, and geopolitics of energy and critical minerals, and then everyone's favorite, depopulation and migration. I'm serious on that last topic. So, as we said at the opening, it's Friday the 13th, and why not, given everything else we've got going on? And there's a lot, by the way, there's a lot taking place or starting on Saturday the 14th and beyond. We're going to get into some of that today. We also have solar activity, now not like solar flares per se, but in the northern hemisphere of the world, we have much higher UV levels, at least for this time of year. And what do higher than normal UV levels do to you, especially when you're not eating right or keeping minerals and hydrations in check? It causes anxiety, low self-esteem, and stress, among other things. Isn't that just peachy when at the same time we've got folks confronting one another in protests and confrontations? Then Israel would really like a war with Iran and is inviting everyone to join them. Should Iran respond on Saturday the 14th beyond what they've already done, that would be the Jewish Sabbath, which will inflame things further. I, along with others, think our friends in the Levant attacked Persia because they felt the U.S. was getting too close to an agreement. Donald, being Donald, is capitalizing on the unexpected by acting like he knew the whole time and Iran better hurry up and cut a deal. Also, just a reminder about the year 2025 in Asian astrology, that's the year of the snake. What occurred in prior years of the snake? Well, we had the beginning of World War I for the United States, World War II for the United States, 9/11, and the start of the U.S. Great Depression in 1929. I mean, what could possibly go wrong with that? Please envision Matthew McConaughey and that meme of him intensely smoking a cigarette, except I'm the one holding the cigarette. Power generation and IT again. Per the good people at oilprice.com, we have the following. Noted on a prior program, especially with artificial intelligence, there's an integer change that would vastly reduce power consumption by more than 90% in data centers. The problem is not necessarily the complexity in the approach. The problem is the AI chips that are currently being used are not designed to perform that way. Simply said, we'd have to replace all the current chips with new ones. Never mind all the people who want micro reactors and more data centers for whom that solution is not one they want to hear about. There's another approach being offered, and I wanted to make you aware, equally not dispensing investment advice, but this could be an investment option for you. This is what's known as reversible computing. Much like the foundation of project management, who is scope, time, and budget, there's something similar in the world of physical hardware of computers, that being computer processor chip speed, memory, network speed, and heat dissipation, among others. A breakdown in one of those will impact the others, and a breakthrough in one will impact the others. It's been said since the late 1990s, we've squeezed everything we can out of computer processor chips. What the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers, or IEEE, call the plateau of energy efficiency in digital logic. Reversible computing is an approach where no information is ever deleted. Without going into the weeds, there are various areas in a computer who frequently clean themselves of short and long-term memory. It reduces the time, processing, and heat created by constantly sustaining old data. This approach says all that maintenance also creates heat and ties up systems. It's very applicable in artificial intelligence computing because many AI systems run in parallel. This is very much a layperson's way of saying this. This type of computing allows operations to go forward and backward at the same time rather than just forward. The takeaway being what it enables via this approach than the ones we use today and how much heat can be dissipated. It might be worthwhile to check into firms working in this area and whether or not there's further adoption of this method. Some of you might be noticing something is absent in the news, that being Panama. Because Lord knows the last few months, all we ever heard was Panama, and China was going to use Panama as a launching ground to invade North America and all that. And right now, crickets. California Rail, a little addition to last week's coverage of the backstory of many on California's rail project. Just for reference, that rail project's been ongoing for 17 years, 10 years behind schedule and $10 billion over budget and growing every day. This item's a little aged, but it's worthwhile to bring up. The new project team managing the rail project was brought in because the prior team had left. The prior team was from a French company called SNCF, who manages the National French Railroad. They came to California to help manage the project for the state. They quit and said the project in California were so disorganized and bureaucratic they couldn't manage it. What did they do instead? They went to North Africa and provided guidance to a country who was more politically functional than California, being Morocco. You have to know you have a problem if the French tell you your government is too bureaucratic. Pennsylvania gold case, the plot thickens. Always go to the source, folks, when something involves the courts rather than the soundbite in the media. These days you can't take any chances. From the court case in Pennsylvania regarding finders keepers in the FBI and the missing Union gold from the Civil War, here's the latest. The judge issued the following order, and I quote, "Order to the defendant," which is the FBI, "shall produce all responsive records by July 17th of 2025. Any pre-March 13th of 2019 operational plans shall be produced in camera no later than July 24th. The court has accelerated the timetable requested by the defendant because the defendant has provided no explanation for why on April 14th of this year, it advised the court that it had located some potentially responsive material and is in the process of scoping that material to determine whether it is responsive to the request. Yet 30 days later, it continues to advise that it's still in the process of scoping that material. It would appear the defendant has taken little, if any, action on this matter over the last month. Measured from April 14th of this year, the court's production deadline of July 17th is over 90 days and consistent with the defendant's capacity to process documents at the rate of 500 pages per month. Signed by Judge Amit P. Mehta on May 16th. The defendant is the FBI and the plaintiff is finders keepers. Now, importantly, what does in camera mean? That means the judge will review the documents the FBI produces first before posting them to the public record if they do at all. Why does that matter? In my court experience, having a judge review something in camera, or said another way, essentially in their chambers by themselves, is a way to avoid objections about evidence. Nothing has been posted to the public record, and in jury trials, it avoids the jury seeing anything until it's determined to be germane to the case or admissible. The judge acts like a referee, because essentially they are, to determine if the evidence is valid. In this court case, it also provides a firewall for the FBI to say, look, if there's anything in here the public shouldn't see because it's tradecraft or whatever, I'll make that determination as the judge. There's no need to have a court hearing to argue about this and take up more time. My gut says it's because the judge is trying to accelerate this process by both telling the FBI you've had plenty of time to produce documents, and also we're not having a hearing to argue about this. That's why I'm reviewing it in camera. I'll keep you all informed as this thing continues to develop. Palantir. There's a lot in the news about Palantir potentially putting all of us into a database, among other things. That database, or databases, I should say, already exists, but that's another topic. One of the items who may have been missed is the following. Palantir's federal board includes such notables as Dr. Deborah Birks. You remember her and her scarves during the coup. Contrary to what you might recall, she was not appointed to her position by Donald 1.0 in his first administration. She was originally hired by President Obama as the PEPFAR administrator. Some of you may recall what PEPFAR was involved in. Interestingly, she was recommended by Matt Pottinger, the Deputy National Security Advisor during Obama's administration. Funny that a national security person would recommend someone for a medical role in a group who's laundering money for biological weapons. Lastly, she was the one who coined the famous statement during congressional hearings when asked, were her statements about the inoculations a lie? And her response was, the vaccine's promises were based on hope. Private equity. Per the coverage on this topic about 2 shows ago, we have a bit more detail. For the month of May, the deal volume among private equity firms fell by 34%, which is pretty big. This follows several months of deals already declining in the PE sector. Another part of this activity is the amount of time spent preparing such deals has increased, no doubt due to the higher risks involved. From the Private Equity Hub website, lawyers specifically are spending much higher amounts of time preparing deals and conducting risk assessments. Several PE firms are trying to make up for the lack of deals in the United States by investing in Europe. I'm not sure that's going to bear fruit, but at least it looks to their superiors like they're trying to do something. The net of these declining deals over the last few months is private equity needs to do something. They don't work for people who tolerate hearing that they can't find anything to invest in. New commercial real estate opportunities. It's nothing new, my friends, and was a common Roman practice. When Rome wanted to launch new construction and the room was not available, the elites of the city would accomplish 2 things at once. They'd set fires to burn out certain areas of the city and blame it on whomever was convenient. The Christians, the Jewish community, ethnic Greeks, slaves, pick one. Wow, that seems so familiar in our contemporary time. Anyway, clearing out cities for quote-unquote revitalization is nothing new. Look at New York City when Rudolph Giuliani was mayor. Oh, sure, 43rd Street in Manhattan was a war zone in the early 80s, but then it was revitalized. Of course, people like the Donald benefited from that too. Here's a little item directly from a friend of mine in Manhattan. If you moved into an apartment or condo in an area that was being revitalized and were paying rent, if you were still living there roughly a year later, you could buy the property. Few people who moved into those places knew that, but those who did made a killing. A friend of mine's sister had an apartment, and a few days prior to the cutoff date told the building owner she wanted to buy the apartment. He freaked out because she was not supposed to know about that, and she knew the truth. So she bought it for just under $1 million because the prices for these types of purchases were set at the time the area was still not really safe. Later, when the area was booming, she sold it for several $1 million. Why am I bringing this up? Recall what occurred during the riots in 2020. Not in all cases, but in several of those cities, the areas who were burned and damaged forced out a lot of residences and businesses. Other people were able to come in and make a killing. That said, depending on the degree of damage to cities beyond just Los Angeles, how much damage will there be? Are there going to be new commercial real estate opportunities after everything burns down? I hear private equity needs something to invest in. I'm joking, but not when I say that. Who are some of the developers who are close to friends of the Newsom family in California while we're at it? Note what I said, the family, not Gavin specifically. And I'll be delving into that topic a bit more later regarding who runs the state of California. What catches my attention? While watching Los Angeles burn yet again, this time not due to wildfires, I saw a lot of imagery. How jaded am I? I zoomed in on one image of National Guard troops standing next to their MRAPs. That would be the mine-resistant, ambush-protected trucks. With flames in the background and various paid actors throwing pallets of dropped-off provided bricks and similar, what caught my attention? Well, the military trucks, because my first reaction was, oh, are those the new Oshkosh MRAPs? Those look nice. I say that for several reasons. The first is I once worked for a company whose design software was used by Oshkosh to build those MRAPs. And prior to that job, I worked for a Washington, D.C. think tank who analyzed what was wrong with our Humvees and why we needed a new MRAP design. That was the impetus for new designs like the ones built by the good people in Wisconsin at Oshkosh. Because when it has to be built right, you can trust a brand like Oshkosh, bagosh. Thirdly, the California National Guard, who, like most assets in that state, often are short of equipment, rolled into LA with the latest gear we have, all with very nice new paint jobs. For people like me, we got the message. Shifting into the alternative archaeology world, the Great Pyramid. Supposedly, they're going to send robots and or fiber optic cameras into the cavities that have been discovered in the Great Pyramid at Giza. There are rumblings with this long-awaited effort being underway. We shall see. There's a cavity, among others, above the Grand Gallery who's about the size of a truck trailer. My ongoing thought on this topic is, yes, those cavities are there in the Great Pyramid. At the same time, I'd be surprised if during the many thousands of years of Egyptian civilization, the Greek and Roman occupations, no one else found them. Though if that was the case, there should at least be rumors of such a discovery during those times. Simply put, are they empty like the giant sarcophaguses they claim held the Great Bull of Heaven or similar? Thanks, Algo. Structures who alternative researchers believe actually held information archives of a pre-flood civilization for safekeeping once the crisis was over. If those chambers contain what they supposedly contain, it would be something not to be unkind. The Egyptians, the Greeks, and the Romans of those eras would not understand, but we would. I noted on a prior program the archaeologist and researcher Alan Alford predicted such chambers would be found several years prior to his death. In fact, exactly where the chambers have been located is what he identified many years ago prior to his death. A man Graham Hancock once described as too difficult to read his material, a statement I find funny. I own several of Alan Alford's books, who are all out of print, of course. For me, Alford dealt heavily with reinterpretations of ancient mythological beliefs, who, if that's not your thing, it does make for long reading. That versus Graham Hancock's shock value of stating, I'm telling you, this damn thing is 40,000 years old, not 4. To each their own. If they do start poking around inside the Great Pyramid, I will definitely have a cup of coffee and watch it live. I just hope it turns out better than Geraldo Rivera and the Al Capone vaults. And Valley Girl, you're correct. Yes, the ongoing work at Mount Ararat around what may be Noah's Ark or a tribute to Noah's Ark. Artificial intelligence. Let us turn to the book of Ryan, Patrick Ryan, all of you in the congregation. And thus the Lord spoke and said, watch your butt when it comes to AI. Praise God. In all seriousness, Patrick Ryan about a year and a half ago warned about the AI topic. He was referencing the Ghislaine Maxwell issue and various goings-on behind the scenes to potentially get her released. I'll paraphrase what he said. Patrick said things surrounding Ghislaine and international affairs at that time was probably the last analog conflict behind the scenes. Following that, everything will become digital, and when that occurs, it'll be unlike anything you can imagine. Recalling what I said about this topic via Patrick on my last program, said another way, And to quote from the old Star Trek series with Shatner and Nimoy, "Computers, Captain, they fight their wars with computers." I swear to God, Gene Roddenberry was either on loan from aliens or was getting his content from ascended masters. Anyway, Patrick demonstrated full biographical backgrounds of people, including photos of them on one of his programs. Then he explained how everything he just showed you was entirely created by AI. For those of you who remember, please watch the 1981 movie Looker with Albert Finney, among others, in it. There are a lot of parallels in that film to what we're dealing with now, including subliminal messaging hidden in AI content being produced. To be Veles about this, it was always present, folks, the subliminal messages. They're just better at it now. It's why I avoid watching advertisements on any platform if I can. Patrick's warning was, once the AI goes full power, everything in our world has to be questioned. I've stated on Rogue the resources at the NSA data center in Utah are something who would make Star Trek's Borg jealous. Now that stuff is going to go pro in a stunning debut worldwide. Another opportunity to point out the film The Forbin Project about the supercomputer called Colossus, a movie credited by many for contemporary films, including the concept of Skynet. To paraphrase another movie from being Pirates of the Caribbean, you best start believing in ghost stories, you're in one. I'll paraphrase and say, you better start believing your life is an AI simulation, folks. You're in one. I have something later who will add to this. Colombian gold. We discussed previously the importance of various ancient shipwrecks around the world, at a minimum collateral of physical precious metals and antiquities, even if they don't necessarily liquidate them on the open market. One of the biggest such shipwrecks in value is the San Jose, who sank off the coast of Colombia with an estimated street value of around $20 billion. I say estimate because until it's brought up, that's based off of the original manifest. It may be worth more. The thing to keep in mind, though, is just because it's a Spanish galleon and it does have gold on board doesn't necessarily mean it's the San Jose. Forensics evaluations by non-intrusive means have been ongoing via the Colombian Navy of the wreck site. When I say non-intrusive, I mean they're scanning very close to the debris of coins and things without picking anything up. The latest evidence is indicating more and more the wreck site is indeed the San Jose. Why is Colombia being so careful about this? Well, a couple of thoughts. The first is, if they confirm it is the San Jose, the manifest from those years still exists, as I mentioned earlier. It means the recovery teams will know exactly what to look for, and importantly, how much in weight, that being around 200 tons, comprised of silver, gold, and emeralds. Second, that wreck is still heavily contested between Colombia and Spain. Under international maritime law, the wreck is the property of the current government of Spain. Colombia has claimed the wreck is theirs because it's in their waters. Confirming the vessel is indeed the San Jose will help the courts start working through this. No doubt an agreement will be reached between Colombia and Spain. My gut says Spain will probably receive about a third of the contents when they're recovered. Amusingly, if this was Britain and Argentina arguing over this, we might have Falklands 2.0. Now on to our main course items today. What's good for General Motors is good for America was a famous congressional statement whose not exactly how that was phrased, but you get my point. I've noted on several Rogue programs the immense impact California has on the United States. How could it not? They're a $3 trillion economy with inside the United States' GDP, just in spite of their problems. Recently, the Visual Capitalist website had a graphic of how much money is spent in the top 10 U.S. states on defense spending. Texas is number one at $71 billion. Number two is Virginia at $68 billion, right next door to Washington, D.C. And number three is the state of California at $61 billion. The states who follow are in the low 20s or teens as far as federal spend. Why does California get such a big chunk? Obviously, part of it is politics and the immense size of the state's population. I'm not joking when I say we must keep that many people working. Recently, some folks in the alternative sector have been digging into who, or more specifically, what families run California. That's no joke, as in my corner of America, I'm very clear on who runs my state and neighboring states, and I mean that literally. For instance, in my home state, I'm very clear on the fact that if I seriously anger one of 3 to 4 families, I will literally have to move out of this state, because neither the courts nor my local sheriff's office can protect me, and that's no joke. I'm personally aware of similar situations in other parts of the country. If you're familiar with the 2 to 3 key mining families in New Mexico, they also are not people you want to anger. To paraphrase Mike Moore, why is it when Nancy Pelosi's husband has a car accident, there's no mention of the other passenger? Why is it when someone evidently was able to get past all his private security protections to assault him, the whole thing was hushed up? You guessed it. To that end, recent work has said 4 main families essentially run California, that being the Brown, Newsom, Pelosi, and Getty families. We covered recently Gavin Newsom's father, William, and his relationship with the Pelosis and the Gettys during the California oil boom, who began in the 1930s. There's something missing in that analysis, though, and frankly, it's too oriented towards the Democrats' bad sort of approach. Oh, sure, those families are up to some horrendous stuff in the state for generations. However, we've conveniently left out others. Like who, you ask? Well, let's start with the Bechtel family, for whom the Bechtel Corporation is named. If you're not familiar with Bechtel, please go investigate them on your own. There are 2 excellent books I can recommend, including the 1989 book, Friends in High Places, and the 2017 book, The Profiteers, Bechtel and the Men Who Built the World. Tom Brokaw once asked one of the Bechtels back in the 1980s why they were not a publicly traded company. Stephen J. Bechtel replied, "We work with governments, not the public," unquote. The Bechtels backed both George Bush and Ronald Reagan. Amusingly, even at the time of his election, many people asked why so many Bechtel people were in Reagan's cabinet. Bear with me just a moment. Aside from Bechtel being connected to Bohemian Grove, their people occupied these posts in Reagan's presidential cabinet. Caspar Kapp Weinberger as Defense Secretary, George Shultz, Secretary of State, Deputy Secretary of Energy Kenneth Davis, all being former executives with Bechtel at the time. Also in Reagan's cabinet was Edwin Ed Meese, who, though not a Bechtel alumni, played a massive role in the administration, including rumors of money laundering with U.S. intelligence through Motorola, among other accomplishments. My point is, whether Bechtel people or not, Reagan's administration let a lot of people into the corridors of power, and it was the Bechtel family who pulled that off. Then we have the Resnicks, who own a considerable amount of water in the state and have been criticized for it. They lean to the Democrat Party, but also contribute to Republicans. You then have several billionaires in Silicon Valley who have Republican leanings, though that's not for philosophical reasons of what the party at least officially stands for. It's because they're pharmaceutical and technology folks who believe those candidates best serve their interests. The key families in California are not necessarily who the press says they are. It's my frequent analogy of high-profile people in the media and the public eye are there on purpose. They take the heat of criticism and threats to their safety to protect those behind them. Something uncomfortable. I'll thank Mike Moore for this item as he went down this road last Tuesday. At the same time, it's one of those moments to check our convictions, beliefs, or even reality. Simply said, we all fall into that trap of when those to whom we're in opposition say something and we automatically discount it because they said it. Equally, you believe your trading card heroes, to quote Mike's frequent analogy, because they're the good guys. An excellent example is Republicans giving the Bush family a pass on human rights violations, among other things in Indonesia, money laundering, and a few political overthrows. And the Democrats giving Bill Clinton a pass because, well, he's just so like regular people in his failures as a person. Never mind that whole Nicaragua arms and narcotics thing out of Mena, Arkansas. Mike's comments on Tuesday included this gem. The FBI has asked the public to turn in anyone throwing rocks at law enforcement in Los Angeles for prosecution. Okay, noted. If laws have been broken, and certainly if law enforcement has been harmed by protest activity. At the same time, is this not the same FBI who's sitting on Jeff Epstein's blackmail evidence, who's now at their disposal for use? The same FBI who has not prosecuted a single person having sex with kids, even though they have the aforementioned films. But Veles, those acts occurred on Epstein's Island, which is in another country. Not really. Little St. James is in the U.S. Virgin Islands, who's a U.S. territory, but let's not even bother with that. What about the sex acts in New York State and Florida? Last I checked, those states have very sharp attorneys general and very sharp FBI field offices. Plus, I'll go there. New York is a strongly Democrat-leaning state, and Florida is a strongly Republican-leaning state, and yet in neither state did anything happen. We've got nothing. No one has been prosecuted. Noting what I said on my last program, the FBI director, among others, is claiming evidence has been found, I always love it when we find evidence, and or videos, that they're now convinced Epstein died of suicide. Promises about JFK, RFK, and Epstein, and we've received nothing. Ironically, this segment was written Wednesday evening, and on Thursday, the CIA announced the release of new documents about the RFK assassination. I have to tell you, I felt like that scene in the old Simpsons episode where Marge looks out the window and says, "That van across the street's been there a long time." The van's logo is Flowers by Irene. Get it? FBI. And then it shows the agents inside the van saying, "We've been made," and then they drive off. Then the other distraction, Los Angeles violence and potential violence in other cities on Flag Day, Saturday the 14th. Boy, and this one's just loaded with content who frighteningly may all be coordinated and by design. On one side of the ledger, we have the child of the Walton family of Walmart fame who's funding protests on Saturday the 14th. We also have some high-profile private equity types funding anti-ICE protests as well as activity on the 14th. What a strange time for such people to come into the public eye. What were they doing prior to all this social hand-wringing, and why are they here now? But as they're in front of the cameras and the public's attention, then I have to ask the question, who's behind them? There simply has to be someone behind them. Then a complete repeat of the Antifa and BLM activity in 2020 of pallets being dropped off with bricks or similar projectiles and people dropping off masks and other riot gear for the protests. Some of you may have seen the photo of the California Metro train with a pallet of bricks in one of the cars. How the heck does somebody get a pallet of bricks on a subway car? You have the license plates, FBI. You know who the people are funding these events and who are damaging public and private property. What are you doing about it, other than nothing? Probably the same level of enthusiasm as that legal case about the Pennsylvania Civil War gold. Gavin Newsom and Mayor Bass of Los Angeles continue to read from their scripts appealing to their base. Meanwhile, even the most ardent pro-America person may find the timing of the big military parade in Washington, D.C. for the Army's 250th anniversary a bit suspect. They had to reinforce the streets in Washington, D.C. the last few weeks because, I don't know if you know how much a tank weighs, but it does tend to tear those roads up. Are you seeing the narrative and the imagery as it's straight up content from Donut, D-O-E-N-U-T, channel on YouTube about signs, portents, ritual, and ceremony? The West Coast is on fire, and the East Coast, aside from the rain, has armies in the streets. Sidebar, don't we make fun of the Russians for those huge military parades they hold each year? Hypocrisy much? In Donut's book, the West Coast burning and the East Coast being wet is a fire and water analogy combined with Masonic pillars. Now again, folks, as I often say, this is not to say the Masons are behind this. It's just to note there's a lot of arcane and ancient imagery at foot here. What is the name of the agency at the center of this? ICE, Immigration Customs Enforcement. ICE and fire. Get it? Last data point on this item. There's an old saying about armchair generals discuss strategy and real experts discuss logistics. Do you know what it takes to mobilize National Guard and military resources into Los Angeles? Twitter, right on cue, was loaded with various statements by people claiming to be serving or former military. These people making statements about how hot it was at 29 Palms, and the Marines will be glad to travel to LA for some policing duty to get out of the heat, cryptically warning Marines don't question orders. Not to be indelicate, all U.S. military personnel question certain orders after Lieutenant Cali at My Lai in Vietnam. The military does not question orders. I guess that plays well with the other side's narrative about the Constitution and no kings in America, neither of which they believe in if their approved trading card heroes are in power. Sure, you can send the National Guard and the military personnel into LA, but once they're there, then what? What I mean is logistics. How are they being fed? How are they sourcing fuel and other resources? I say that because there are little to no supply lines supporting those resources, at least in the beginning. I've been provided photos of the National Guard personnel trying to buy fuel at local LA gas stations. I'll go there. Which ethnic groups are operating those gas stations? Given the climate in the city right now, do you think they'll be allowed to acquire fuel? If they refuse to provide them fuel, are you going to use force? How many days of food do those resources have available? Whether you get along with the LA city government or not, did their emergency planning folks have time to coordinate your presence? What are the protocols for arrests between local law enforcement and the National Guard? Could LAPD have handled it without the National Guard? If they could leverage their mutual aid agreements with other cities, maybe. It's not that they don't need the help. It's because the National Guard was not stood up properly, and now LAPD must support them along with their own assets. Depending on your access to information or willingness to dig around, much of what I just said is not known. In the end, though, this is all orchestrated TV, and beyond the human impact, you may want to switch the channel to something else. Jeff Epstein growing clarity. To paraphrase an old trope who's very true, we continue to lurch as a society toward a world where books may be the last bastions of truth out there, specifically books with well-documented sources and references. Equally, stories like Epstein take time, great photo, to disassemble given the degree of intentional disinformation out there. Noting what I and others have said about blackmail and disinformation, let us take note of such an example with Epstein. What is the focus frequently on Jeff Epstein? Well, it's who were his clients, and what's the detail about all the sex on the island, and what celebrities and politicians were involved, and similar. As distasteful as a lot of that is, should our attention really be focused on that specific area? I'm not saying it doesn't matter, but is that constant topical focus perhaps an intentional distraction? Much like the distraction of that building with the blue and white stripes on it. Especially when, regardless of who's in the White House, that's the media's focus. Beyond Whitney Webb's books, several sources have pointed out the following. First, Jeff Epstein was connected to the arms industry for years, and that's a fact. Second, he was heavily connected to a variety of private equity outfits. That's a fact. Third, one of the bigger private equity groups is the Mega Group, who was run by Les Wexner of the Limited Companies and Victoria's Secret fame, who we've covered previously. And the Mega Group is essentially an intelligence asset of our friends on the Levant. Now, let me pause on item 3 for a moment. If you're an intelligence organization and you invest vast resources in a guy like Epstein and the related operation, are you seriously just going to stop at sexual blackmail? I don't think so. You're going to leverage the gamut from sexual blackmail to arms to private equity laundering and about anything else you can run through the operation. Fourth item. Nice analogy, Epstein was connected to a company called DynCorp, D-Y-N-C-O-R-P. We could have a whole show on that company and every trope imaginable when it comes to the shady stuff they were involved in. Now, I would note that company no longer exists. They were purchased in 2021 by a company called Amentum, A-M-E-N-T-U-M, who's a $9 billion large national security government contractor, same as DynCorp was. Some highlights from DynCorp include being accused of human trafficking in Bosnia back in '95, overbilling the U.S. government on contracts. They paid $9 million to resolve Department of Justice lawsuits, deep ties to U.S. aid. You know, the folks DOJ is investigating, provided intelligence training services globally, and it just goes on. So what was Epstein's connection among many with DynCorp? Well, amusingly, their company's FAA number for the tail numbers on their planes was the one Epstein was using. He had a DynCorp tail number on his private jet. That is, when those same tail numbers were not being used on U.S. government military Bronco aircraft spraying pesticide on drug crops in South America. Because as the old joke goes, the government doesn't like competition. This, by the way, is tail number November 474 Alpha Whiskey. Again, N474AW. A tail number who currently is being used by a private pilot in Louisiana, of whom I know nothing. There is more, as Epstein was close to the CEO of DynCorp, a man named Steve Feinberg, who it's believed was leveraging Epstein to enable key technology and medical science to Israel, while also enabling DynCorp to capture key defense markets, including ammunition. What else did Steve do? He co-founded Cerberus Capital in 1992, and of course we've all heard of Cerberus. It was Cerberus, you see, who owned DynCorp before it was sold. You'll remember the sorts of things Cerberus has been accused of, including their connections to the CIA. Steve Feinberg's current net worth is around $5 billion. Where is Steve today, the gentleman on your screens? Well, Why, he's the Deputy Secretary of Defense of the United States. Absolutely nothing to see here, folks. Concluding thought, or thoughts. We have said the following on these programs. We may be entering a period where a lot of things are going to acquire simultaneously. Maybe that's to distract from other world events we should be noticing. Maybe it's simply another stage or step in the planning by apex elites. Maybe it's both. What matters is we internalize that reality and remind ourselves this is another time to verify thoroughly. To keep with my movie references from the noting the movie The Matrix, were you listening to me, Neo, or were you looking at the woman in the red dress? Stop following the packaged Hollywood narrative, my friends, about ideologies for or against immigration or foreign nationals in the U.S., the rule of law, the military, and all the rest of it. From the signs and portents category from Donut and his observations to several other people out there, June is going to be active. Obviously, a big one is tomorrow, Saturday, June 14th, which includes the Army Parade in Washington, D.C., a number of city protests of the Trump presidency, as well as other protests against ICE. Will the various city protests be anticlimactic? Who knows? Like 2020, will they only be the beginning of ongoing demonstrations that will last for months? Who knows? Regardless, and as stated earlier, the FBI and most certainly the NSA have the resources to already know who's organizing these events and paying for them, if not their goals. Of the many law enforcement folks I work with periodically, they're trying to get their arms around what kind of disruptions they will encounter. I didn't mention it yet today, but the other one who's taking place right now in this perfect storm of events is the Soccer World Cup, which is being held here in the United States. These games will be taking place from Saturday the 14th, wow, there's that date again, to July 13th. If we have metropolitan disruptions, those could have an impact on individual games or the completion of the cup itself. So as I said, a lot of folks right now are leaning on their law enforcement partners, including some private equity firms, to get them some intel. Now, and yes, it's the Donald's birthday on the 14th. Now, what I'm about to tell you in my following comments is a Rogue News exclusive. I have taken a look out there of alternative commentators, YouTube, list goes on, and I haven't seen this anywhere. Now, as a sidebar, I will say sarcastically, I will be monitoring to see who repeats what I'm about to say. I was made aware of concerns raised by various city leaders about rumors on Craigslist and similar forums, and even the dark web. The concern of these city leaders were several organizations are offering money, training, and supplies to protest or disrupt certain key events over the next few days. For these city leaders, that was a concern. I'll also tell you I've personally seen such posts reposted to Twitter, as well as provided to me by folks in the law enforcement community because of the work I'm doing right now. The reply to those metropolitan leaders from their law enforcement colleagues was to the effect, yes, we are aware of these postings. And then they went on to say, those are unsubstantiated, though, and difficult to prove they're real or not. Now, follow me very closely on what I'm about to say, and then I'll summarize. They stated, and I quote, both our internal law enforcement intelligence resources and outside partners, you can read that as private security firms, have not been able to learn much regarding plans, resources, intended disruptions, or similar. We will remain vigilant and will alert you as soon as we have some actionable data. These law enforcement folks were not speaking to politicians. Remember the rule in Washington, D.C. about never telling Congress anything unless you want it on the 6 o'clock news. That's not who these law enforcement folks were speaking to. They were speaking to real, actual government leaders, people behind the scenes who are actually doing things, as well as leaders in everything from fire department circles, security personnel to corporations and other organizations, as well as first responders and people in emergency management. People, if these folks had the intel, they would share it. Or at least they'd say something to the equivalent of, meet us on this street corner and we'll tell you what we know. Now, yes, there are websites who describe what various protests are going to be focusing on, the times and locations of those protests, counter protests, how to take part, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a number, we'll update your phone. What I'm talking about is hidden intel behind these events, hidden intelligence behind these events. What these law enforcement folks said was, we're leveraging our internal intelligence resources and very expensive external resources. And to use the military term, we are Winchester, meaning we've got nothing or very little. Now, why does what I just said matter? Because first, if there was any doubt prior to 2020, there was no doubt after 2020 regarding paid crisis actors, paid protesters, paid organizers, and similar in the Antifa and BLM protests. Even pseudo-mainstream media have shrugged and said, well, yes, those types of resources do exist. Second, protesters and organizers are paid and directed by folks who work through layers of law firms and accounting firms. These are often not big-time firms either, and they're under the radar. The many layers guarantee mountains of legal privilege, making it very hard to know who hired who for what reason and who's behind it. Further, if you start digging into those companies and taking people's depositions, you'll probably get a visit from people with bad attitudes. Third, because the first 2 points are known, it means the FBI and the NSA know it, as do senior law enforcement leaders. Plus, they've had 5 years to refine and hone their skills in monitoring both the pawns on the chessboard and the more important players behind them. And very importantly, the uses and sources of cash behind those activities. That's an excellent image. Fourth, those higher-end intelligence firms I mentioned. Folks, nearly every one of those outfits are populated by ex-FBI, ex-Justice Department, ex-prosecutors, ex-police officers, ex-special operators out of the military, and a lot of other stuff, plus some forensics people. What does that mean? Well, it means they all have hooks back in their old outfits. And that's more than half their workload to get paid is finding intelligence for their customers. When the time is right, their buddies at those agencies will then get jobs with them in the private sector. That's how it works. Fifth, much of the current activity out there are the same paid protesters and leaders using the same methods and networks of funding and direction, meaning all those law enforcement agencies should have a really good idea of what's going on. Sixth and final point, then if those agencies know, how is it that private intelligence firms have nothing they can offer a variety of major stakeholders across the country right now? I mean, they're telling the people who run Chicago, for instance, well, we just don't know what to tell you. What? There are only two possibilities. Those federal agencies have no idea what's going on, which is impossible, or they've told their friends in those private intel firms to keep their mouths shut, or they've told them nothing at all, which is the same outcome, who is everything is clamped down. So my friends, why? Why is it all clamped down? Because all of this activity is not taking place because of Russia, China, North Korea, or aliens on the White House lawn being behind it. Now, as much as I can, and frankly should, state on the air, you need to understand the following. This is a group of interests who, I'm dead serious, go back to the networks who funded Gladio. And if you'll recall, Gladio was our behind-the-scenes intelligence operation in Europe following World War II. I'm sorry, Veles, what did you just say? Yes, I'm very serious. Ready to be shocked? What is the modern iteration of the asset the U.S. federal government used to use to fund Gladio and all those military action units throughout Europe during the Cold War? The modern iteration of that financing organization, folks, is U.S. aid. U.S. aid is and has always been a covert funding mechanism. They just change the name every couple of decades. Now let's pause for a moment. Remember, there's no good or bad actors here, just powerful elites fighting it out. You see it as pro-military parades in Washington, D.C. You see it as grassroots protests of the current administration, but that's just window dressing. To quote Babylon 5, there are giants in the playground and we have to get out of their way. Nor is this solely about a single business with foreign nationals working there without legal status to be in the U.S. Those types of arrests occur all the time. But yet this time, everything went nuclear. The owner of the business that ICE busted in Los Angeles recently got out of federal prison for several charges, including money laundering. Do you recall prior programs where we covered all the different ways you can launder money in the U.S.? But we have to remember, there's small-time money laundering and big-time money laundering. Small-time, comparatively, is used car lots that are all cash, car washes, strip clubs, bars, laundromats, and one of my favorites, art boutiques. I mean, if you buy that lump of artistic glass for $5 million, who's to say artistically it wasn't worth the price? Now imagine you're laundering the kind of money who, I don't know, would let you overthrow a government. You know, U.S. aid kind of money. The bust of that business was the spark who caused this level of reaction. Let's step back for a few moments, folks. The official story was ICE was loosely said to just be arresting anyone in LA. Then the story changed, and they said, well, they were raiding a local business. Then they said a major laundering operation was disrupted, and suddenly a proxy army took to the streets in short order, and national protests were organized. If you read the Chinese tactician Sun Tzu's works, you would know this military move very well. You create a military operation who forces your adversary to reveal what is important to them. Laundering on this scale is obviously important, and so we had this reaction. Again, this isn't about Democrats and Donald Trump. This is apex elites fighting. Because that one business is one of many, 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 many such places that are used for laundering. Because this is, to use the term, folks, when you're doing these things at scale, you need a lot of little ones to combine into one big operation. In fact, go back to any of the very well-written books by authors who are either dead or in hiding, who wrote, and again, this isn't just about the Clintons, but who wrote about the vast laundering that was going on with Bill Clinton, both when he was in Arkansas as well as president. And the whole thing about the BCCI Bank and all the laundering out of Indonesia and the Philippines and similar. This, and we don't have all the facts, this interruption, keyword, into these laundering networks is disrupting a lot of powerful people's money. And again, it isn't the good guys are running the government and they're trying to shut all this stuff down. It's one powerful group of factions are trying to shut or impair it for a time or entirely. And so suddenly now you have, and that's why I use the term, that's why you now have an entire proxy army. I mean, look at it. It's right in front of your eyes. Multiple cities, public campaigns. They've even telegraphed it in advance. Come together, everybody, this Saturday, and let's protest the Donald being king, none of which is the truth of what this is all about. And this whole thing, ironically, as big as it is and as widespread as it is just the tip of the iceberg. And of course, what's taking place with all of this at the same time? Well, what we opened the show with. We have violence with Iran and Israel right now. We've got a couple of other things hopping out there. We've got folks trying to keep the Ukraine conflict going. The list just goes on. So with that, Algo, I yield the floor.
Oh, great show as always. Quick note, when looking for images, I was kind of looking for, some type of covert, envelope handing over in the parking lot. And I'm glad that I had the tab set to one particular tab because I searched Deep Throat and I found something that does not belong on this show. All right, so I'll go backwards here. We were chatting in the in our you, me, and V chat, and what do you think of it? I know I kind of already know what you think of it, but I think things like OnlyFans, massive opportunity for money laundering at a gargantuan scale. There's billions that run through that, and I get the feeling that there's like this tiered system of money laundering. Obviously, a lot of it can just be taken directly from the taxpayers and put through, the channels that we know of. But I think a lot of dark money goes through things like OnlyFans and, PORN Hub and things like that. There's just, tens of thousands of faceless people who aren't audited. That's just something.
I concur with the narrative that those websites were basically vacuum cleaners to pick up data. Do I believe there's some laundering that's been going on there? Yeah, especially when you look at the incorporation of where the businesses are located. But as you and I, Algo, have been on this earth for quite a while, there's a number of different places, a number of different things in the world where, to the average person, you'll be in a situation and you'll see somebody say, "Oh yeah, well we like, for instance, landscaping. Well, we only take cash. We want to avoid too much taxes with the man and this, that, and the other." I get it. But even I, as well read as I am on many, but not everything, when I found myself traveling across rural America, driving to a client site on one end of the country for a prior contract I was on, I kept passing all these all cash used car lots. And it took me a while. And then bumped into a friend of mine in a bar at the client site, and they just kind of looked at me like, "What's wrong with you?" and said, "Well, yeah, because the business can show X number of vehicles. There are easy ways to lie about VIN numbers or whatever." And I said, "Yeah, but who's benefiting from it?" And they were like, "Oh, well, it's meth. It's methamphetamine dealers. That's how they launder their money, because it's all rural. I mean, who the hell's gonna? Why would the IRS spend the time to put auditors on the trail of these guys?" And of course, I've known a number of friends of mine. I got some friends I knew in high school that work for a company that sells software to bars, and it makes sure that the bartender pours exactly what they're supposed to in each drink and similar. And the stories those folks have told me about the fact that there's not a gentleman's club they've ever sold software to. It's you don't know exactly who the hell's running that joint, but it's and again, and I have nothing against the Italian community, but I mean it's the joke about pizza places and similar, where it's like, "Hey, Tony, where'd all this money come from?" "Yeah, well, we sold a lot of pizza that was just all cash." It's like, okay, well, that's a lot of dough, figuratively and literally. And Valley Girl is correct. Yes, nonprofit religions.
We sold enough pizzas to buy a politician. It's just
exactly. It's all local. Not to point any fingers. I know folks that are very fond of the following person, but even I had to kind of wince, like, "Come on, guys, you can do this better," when it turned out that Joel Osteen's church, in their corporate headquarters, there was a maintenance guy that was doing work on one of their bathrooms, and he pulled down a drywall, and they found like $80,000 in cash wrapped up inside the wall. And it's like, oh man, I'm not saying Joel was in on that or any member of his family. I'm just saying it's a little weird that you got 80 grand packaged up inside the wall.
Hey, it's a miracle.
It is a miracle.
Praise the Lord. I have a short 80 grand.
But and I won't get into it on today's program, folks, but I mean, there are articles and things you could read. There are some folks out there who have dug into Pat Robertson and the 700 Club, and unfortunately, what was really going on behind the scenes with that and him specifically. And I had family members that used to watch 700 Club, no pun intended, religiously. And of course, I've always been strongly of the belief that when it comes to a lot of things in this world, there are rules. I've had this conversation with clients of mine in the academia, the government, and the commercial sector about, look, we've all been involved in corporate wars and this, that, and the other, but there are rules. And, one of those rules is you don't get a bunch of administrative assistants fired who were just trying to do their jobs. They weren't part of this, you don't carpet bomb the peasants down the road, just leave them out of it. And it's the same thing. When you leverage a faith-based organization, and there are so many people in this world who need that kind of spiritual life, and you use it to just take advantage of people, there is a special place in hell for you. There is, in whichever hell you believe in, to quote from Big Trouble in Little China, they're coming for you. And and then very, very well said, short bus mooner, Scientology. I mean, beyond the CIA connections to Scientology, the amount of laundering going through that organization is immense. So it's I had a T-shirt I bought from oh dear God, the guy who lives in Japan and can't come back to the United States, and it said America. It was like Dawson? It looked like Ryan Dawson, and it was a Starbucks logo. And it, instead of America runs on or no, not Starbucks, on Dunkin' Donuts. America runs on Dunkin' Donuts. But he took that and he crossed out Dunkin' Donuts and he wrote in blackmail. America runs on blackmail. But I remember talking to some of the FBI guys I used to work with one time, and we were just shooting the gristle, and our phones are in a Faraday bag and our backs all against the walls. We're watching the door of the bar we're in. And I looked at them one time and I said, Is there anything left in this country that's still legitimate? And one of the guys looks at me and goes, "What do you mean?" And I said, "No, think about it." I said, there is so much damn corruptions, payoffs. I'm not even talking about state and federal taxes. I'm just like, is are we all going to wake up one morning and realize beyond just the whole matrix aspect of the world we live in, that it's like everything is illegitimate? Like there's no, even, like I'm going to find out later that my local veterinarian is laundering money or something. It's just, there's so much in our world. It goes to the story I told you all about my friends in New Jersey who discovered, because they're members of the Greek community and they all know each other and no different than other ethnic communities. And one of their relatives was working for the school system and discovered, oh, lo and behold, all the school officials get money kickbacks from pharmaceutical firms for every kid who's on ADHD drugs. And so when my buddy and his wife got called in for a parent-teacher meeting, and they said, well, your son and daughter are kind of hyperactive, but the school has a special deal. And my buddy just looked at him and slammed down a copy of the paperwork. And, the teacher and their supervisor were very, very angry. How dare you? And where did you get a copy of this? And it's like, yeah, this is fraud. Don't come near our kids or any of the other members of our community's kids with you and your damn needles and your medications. Just get away.
When I was in first grade, I don't remember much of this. Apparently I was getting in trouble. I was crawling around, barking like a dog, clapping. And so parent-teacher conference happened. And the way my father tells it is that the teacher explained this. My dad goes, oh, okay, well, my dad's like, we just didn't say it out loud, but said, we'll go home and spank them. That's just how we used to solve things with children back in the day. And the teacher said, no, we think he's bored. There might have been a suggestion for those kind of, they said, well, we have these drugs, and the parents were like, we'll just cut the sugar out of his diet and put him in soccer. Like, they didn't, thank goodness, didn't put me on any of that stuff. And then, I started going to class with kids that were a lot older than me, and that was my education. And instead of being a brain surgeon, I started trading imaginary internet money, and here I am today. To the Waltons, one thing that I don't know if you were alluding to this or saving it for later, so forgive me, but one thing about Walmart, Amazon, and I don't know, maybe McDonald's, but definitely Walmart and Amazon, they pay like a below poverty wage, and then they all are on benefits, like, what do you call it? Welfare, basically. And it's like done through the company. Like Walmart helps you get on the benefits, like something like, I don't remember the percentage, but it's huge. It's a double-digit percentage of people that are on like SNAP or, Walmart employees. And so apparently it's being rumored that a lot of the people in these riots in LA are Walmart employees. So you wonder why the Waltons are now showing up, in the news.
The thing about the Waltons always reminds me of that scene, in the book, The Good Earth, the classic Chinese epic, The Good Earth, where a farmer works himself hard his whole life to build up something for his kids, and he keeps trying to explain to them, don't blow up what we've created. And at the end of the book, he keeps telling them, the land, you gotta make sure you never sell off the best land. And as he's laying there dying, his two sons are describing which of the parcels of the best land they're going to sell so that they can have a lot of money and just go live the way they want to live. Sam Walton for years told his family and his leaders of the company, under no circumstances was anybody to live, for lack of a better word, at their means or above their means, even if they had the money to do so. And he expected everyone to wear the same clothes that were sold by Walmart. He didn't want anybody going down the road of fine suits and tailored clothing and this, that, and the other. He wanted everybody to kind of maintain some humility about the company. And of course, many of you are probably aware of the story, which is no story, that he drove the same pickup truck with no power brakes and no power steering for most of his life. And when I was working in telecommunications, I spoke to our office who took care of Arkansas, where the headquarters was. And we were at a company meeting for MCI back in the old days. And we were sitting around in the bar and somebody said, yeah, boy, It's so predictable. They said, what's going on in Arkansas now with Walmart? I said, what do you mean? And they were like, literally the week the old man died, people came into town to make custom suits. Everybody had new homes built. Some luxury car dealers showed up, and all those rules about restraint and everything else went right out the window. And it's like, yeah, and that's going to get you exactly what you've got. And it's happened so many times. Even the old textile mills, as horrible as they were, the minute that discipline went out the road or went out the window, everything started falling apart. And I have no doubt, given that kind of money, I mean, I've shared with all of you on a prior show, a good friend of mine sold a business for a couple of $1 million, and it was one of those deals where he had to join the company for about 9 months or so to make sure that what he sold them was working properly, and this, that, and the other, and that it wasn't a bunch of crap. And at the end of 9 to 12 months, they're like, okay, very good, you can leave now, and thanks for onboarding us to the product that you built, and here's the rest of your money. And literally the next morning, he goes out his front door of his home in a successful medium-sized city here in America, and literally there's 2 guys on his doorstep who are ringing his doorbell. And they're like, hi, how's it going? We're part of the local private equity group. They handed him a piece of paper and they go, here's when we're having the meetings. We'd love to see you there. And he went to one of the first meetings and they were like, here, you sit at this table because these guys know the industries that you have experience with. And then we have these breakfasts and people come in and they describe to us their businesses, and then we decide whether or not we're going to, angel invest or whatever. And he's looking at everybody saying, I didn't even know you guys were here. And they're like laughing, going, of course not. But you're part of the club now because you have money, like real money. But by the way, now that you have real money, don't do anything that pisses us off. And it's like, oh, God, it's the man behind the curtain. It's the Great Oz.
I can't believe you guys are here. We're not here.
Right.
Oh,
nobody's
boy.
here.
One thing I was going to ask you, if you could elaborate on, or on which you could elaborate, if you would, to use proper English, is when the military rolled out in LA with all their new, nicely painted new gear, and you said you got the message. Care to tell us what that message is?
Just that basically they were very quickly assembled and sent into the city. Again, it's kind of like when a buddy of mine got a hold of me and we had the city riots and there was National Guard and others walking around Washington, D.C. And a friend of mine got a hold of me and said, look closely at the pictures. That's all they said. And so I went back and looked at the pictures, and then I'm like, oh, none of the AR-15s or the M16s have any clips in them. There's no bullets. It's the things you look for. So when I watch the National Guard roll in, and it's like every vehicle so far, at least that I saw, this is probably not the case entirely, but from all the photos I saw, and they were different locations, it wasn't just the same photo over and over and over again, they're all brand new MRAPs with brand new tires. And my first thought was, this is the same state that just got barely by the skin of their teeth through the Palisades without losing almost all of Los Angeles. And fire trucks are tied up in maintenance and or going through regulation to be approved to go back out on the road. There's budgetary problems everywhere. Los Angeles, at least based on what happened earlier this week, is going to need about 7 to 8 new cruisers, if not more. And National Guards are no different. I mean, if I was to drive down the road from my house, half of those vehicles are still painted tan. I mean, we haven't even bothered painting them over since Iraq or Afghanistan. And they're all driving older vehicles. So it's like you show me National Guard troops and they've got 1 or 2 new vehicles, okay. But when National Guard troops roll in and every single vehicle is brand new, or at least figuratively speaking is new, the paint is clean, it's recently painted, brand new rubber on the tires, and it's like, I'm sorry, in my paranoid brain, unless I've got more to go on, it's like that catches my attention. It's like, what are the odds that all of these National Guard troops are all driving brand new vehicles? Now, they may not, at least when they rolled in, it may have changed since then, but it's like their access to fuel and supplies and food may be limited. But as far as the photo op is concerned, it looked great.
Okay, so you're saying it's for appearances?
I'm saying it's not just for appearances. It's not to be indelicate, if you send in military forces, but your military looks like it's had better days, how seriously are protesters or the people you're fighting going to take you? But if you roll in with brand new shiny equipment, it's a lot more impressive.
I got you. Yeah, maybe the appearance is the wrong word because you use the term optics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, the other end of it is it's the comment that's often been made about people coming across the border, where it's like, really, you walked all the way into the United States from deepest, darkest Mexico. Nothing against Mexico, and it's like with brand new shoes, brand new cell phones. You know, anybody who's anybody can go on YouTube and see the videos of all of you rumbling your way through the country on buses. And you're acting as though, oh yeah, we just swam across the Rio Grande to find freedom and jobs. No. You're paid by Carlos Salinas, who owns pretty much everything that's telecommunications in that country, and you've got debit cards and everything else at your disposal. The other thing too is, was Walmart having a sale on flags from Mexico?
Right.
I mean, I'm pretty down on all the different ethnic groups in Los Angeles. I mean, literally, there's a restaurant called Formosa in downtown LA because they don't even want to call themselves Taiwan, much less nationalist Chinese.
Right.
I mean, there are ethnic Iranian/Persian restaurants where if you go in, they will describe themselves as Persians because they all fled after the loss of the Shah's government, and they've got the little Iranian flags with the lions still on it. You know, I mean, there is about every ethnic and sub-ethnic group you can imagine in Los Angeles, but yet evidently the only group who's upset right now are people from Mexico. I mean, that is such complete BS. And the flags are all my personal favorite. Not only are the flags shiny and new, and this was said by Bridget Plessy, I think, on YouTube, but they've still got the folds in them, for God's sakes. It's like you literally just took that flag from Mexico out of the packaging. I mean, if I was from Mexico, I would be pissed off because it's like, oh, please. I mean, we have our grievances with the United States and the city of Los Angeles, but holy shit, you're totally just using us.
Yeah, they're not even trying. You know, it's funny. I dated a girl who was, she was like, you know how Iran is actually a multicultural place. There's actually a fair amount of Jewish people there, and she was Armenian and like I think Iranian or like nationally, but Armenian in ethnically.
That's a hell of a mix in one sitting. But please continue.
But wait, there's more. Guess what she did for CIA? Interrogation.
Nice.
Yeah, that was a fun first couple of dates. But there's LA, and that's I was living in LA at the time. Definitely a very diverse spot, and yeah, a lot of Persians came over when the U.S. said, "Yeah, bring your billions."
Right.
We'll house it here. Don't worry. So that's. I think we covered an awful lot, and I know a lot of people are going to have questions about Iran and Israel, which we glossed. I don't want to say we glossed over. We covered it, but one thing that that's interesting, and I'm just wondering, like, so there are those who feel that like kind of a deal was already made for the nuclear power generation in Iran. I know a lot of people, Iran's the bad guy, China's the bad guy, everybody's the bad guy. Right. So everybody try to put that away for a minute. My feeling about this business with Iran is not so much that Israel wants to wipe Iran off the face of the earth. That's just simply not possible. It's just they would kill each other. And I think Iran would have a better chance at surviving just due to sheer size. But we all know they have enough conventional weapons to blow up Israel. So I don't think it's a we're going to wipe each other out thing. My theory on that is that they don't want Iran to have nuclear power generation because they'll be economically far more competitive. So a lot of people don't understand what's happened to Iran over the past, and I won't make a long thing out of this because we're way past the end of the show here. But Iran has been they've been victim of the same kind of financial warfare as like Venezuela. They're in Turkey, right? So they just had their currency like inflated, devalued. They're not allowed to sell their oil. Like they've been pretty much economically embargoed, and up until In fact, what happened to Russia's forex reserves um, happened to Iran's first. They stole from Iran first, and that was actually the first time the world was kind of like, oh, do we really trust the dollar? They just took Iran's dollars, like. And then when it happened to Russia, that's when I think you're starting to see the like, okay, that's enough. So now that things are loosening up in a certain way around the world, I think I'm wondering like if they're stopping the nuclear power generation so they're not economically competitive. As are they really worried about nuclear bombs? Like it can't be that hard for Iran to get a nuclear weapon without making it themselves.
Well, yeah, there's there's a lot with that. Some quick takeaways, and we talked about this probably a year ago. V and I did on one of the shows he hosted. Like Japan, if Japan had to put together a nuclear weapon, and that's the thing, folks, that isn't often talked about. Well, this country has nuclear weapons. This country has nuclear weapons. Pretty much, if you're a first world economy, you could build a nuclear weapon. Your delivery mechanism might have a lot to be desired, but you can build a nuclear weapon. I mean, between what you've got sitting in medical research and similar, you can build at least a 1 to 5 kiloton bomb pretty straightforwardly. Is Iran in a position to do that? Well, they probably have been for some time, but for anybody to actually use one invites a whole lot of unintended consequences of country A was just attacked by country Z, and everybody's wondering why the hell was country Z even involved? Well, because country A was about to use the crispy critter cruncher, and everybody in the region was like, well, we can't do it, so we'll have South Korea bomb them or whatever it might be. The other thing, too, is just a reminder, folks, the two most inefficient oil industries on this planet are Mexico and Iran. Mexico's Pemex is so screwed up that if you were to seriously clean up Pemex, the Mexican government probably would not need as much of the remittances from their folks working in the United States sent home. But if they were to clean up Pemex, that's going to create a lot of problems. A lot of powerful people's corruption is going to get lighter. Please see laundering. Then you're going to have to admit to the Mexican public, who, for as much as Americans feel like, oh, I'd take to the street and protest, go to South America. I'll show you what politics really look like. Or Italy on a hot day. So it's like you're going to tell the Mexican populace that Pemex could have cleaned up its act 30 years ago and the taxes and everything else could have been reduced? Oh, hell no. The other one is Iran. Now, part of Iran's problem was all the top engineers left after the 79 revolution, and they didn't really train good ones afterward. They've tried to hire hired guns in the oil industry to come in and help them out, but it's a twofold problem. One is the management of Iran's oil industry. The other is their access to new equipment and better equipment, rather than trying to cobble together all the old systems they have. But to Algo's point, yes, if Iran could stop consuming their own valuable natural resources and instead sell that, in pure power politics, it would create a major destabilizing event for Saudi Arabia and a number of other players. So again, this is that age-old thing of none other than Adnan Khashoggi standing on 60 Minutes in the 1970s during the Iran-Iraq War, showing beaten up American military equipment of Iran that's sitting on the side of the road, and the reporter is saying, "Wait a minute. Yeah, America sold this equipment years ago. Why are the tank tracks and everything brand new?" And it's like, well, because they're getting them from Israel.
Yep. No, it's just a big.
Dad would like you and I to get off the air so that John Singleton can start his thing.
All right. Everybody, thank you for watching. Singleton is up next. I'm sure it'll be pretty quick. And Vela's amazing show as always. Thanks for coming on.
And my appreciation to you and the AWACS aircraft for making this show possible. So with that, folks, V and John will be on here shortly. Please catch that program. And thanks for joining us as always. Also, one small housekeeping item: no show for me next week. Other than that, have a great weekend and stay the hell out of major cities.
Yeah. Ciao.